When I was still topside, I worked for one of the big firms. I was a tech. We had hardware everywhere in the world, but most of our accounts were in the United States. I was from a little nothing town, glorified highway intersection. I took business and computer courses in college and moved to a slightly bigger town up the highway. And one day, I ended up getting hired by the big boys. I believed at the time it was on account of my skills, my work ethic. I learned a lot with that firm, but the most eye-opening job was probably the last one I did. I always believed that the dedicated, the hard-working would be rewarded above all others, even in America, even at the dawn of 2021, even after how the previous year had gone. I still believed. The firm was called Merit International, and I suppose I always felt like it was fitting, until my employment there was terminated. Now, though, I know that it was never about merit, only opportunity. And even the most powerful folks out there couldn't manufacture opportunity. It was one of the last things in life, if not the last thing, on this tired old earth that was left entirely up to the fates. Well, that day, I didn't know it would be my last day on the job, and I think that might be what really changed my feelings, how unprepared for it I was. I had gotten kind of spoiled, I guess. I had been rewarded generously for my contributions to the firm. Hell, some would say more generously than any of the techs. Back then, I felt deserving of my treatment. After all, I was willing to travel at a moment's notice. I had no family, no friends. I was the ideal tech, and I spent my earnings drenching myself in media, in art, in the richness of all the nostalgic collectibles available on the internet. My home was a museum of expensive nerd swag. When it was time for the next job, I always left immediately because I could. I hadn't spoken to my family in years, never had a relationship. My sources of fulfillment and joy were always right there waiting when I clocked out and returned. I got a lot of sweet plum jobs that way, being available. The other techs would have loved, but the others, they just weren't quick enough, managing all their messy business, their spouses, their kids. I had no life but the firm, and felt that my success was earned in exchange for this sacrifice. But it wasn't a sacrifice. I hated most people. Most people hated me. It wasn't a sacrifice at all. It was just selfishness. I couldn't see it back then. I'd been provided an opportunity by a larger, more selfish force than myself to embrace that feeling, that perfect individualism. And when the firm finally saw through my bullshit, they provided an opportunity to someone else, a better candidate, a real true believer. On the day I was terminated, I took breakfast at the diner as I always did, fiddling with some hardware designs and suffering a cup of especially weak, tasteless coffee. The waitress shuffled by, a little hunched goblin, intent on making it to the kitchen with an armload of dishes. Not a fucking chance. I was a details man. It was why I thought I was so successful. "You could take a little pride in your work," I said, waiting for her to get just a few steps past me. "Excuse me, sir?" she said, skidding around and almost dropping the dishes. Her eyes widened a little, and I knew that she was imagining the dishes falling, the cost of replacing them being deducted from her paycheck. Good. She could use a little motivation, I thought. "This is the worst cup of coffee I've ever had. I eat breakfast here every day, usually lunch too." I know, sir," she murmured, eyes down. She sounded so tired, and I hated her for that. I hated her bent little goblin frame. I hated the management of the diner for subjecting me to this washed-up, sad creature, spreading her sadness around and distracting successful people who only wanted to start their day with a tolerable coffee. "Well, it gets worse every fucking morning, and I've had about enough of this shit," I said. I felt as if I was being extremely charitable and restrained. I wanted to fling the cup at her as hard as I could. I was the only customer. I probably could have done that, but it wasn't enough. I wanted more. "The machine might be broken somehow. It don't act right." I've fixed it a couple of times. Manager won't buy a new one, she said. Then why not fix it again, I thought. Got lazy, started expecting someone else to solve the problem, and now it was my problem. My desire to restrain myself completely vanished, and I wanted to hurt her. I set her up first. "Oh, handy with gadgets, are you?" I said, suddenly charming, interested. "I'm sorry, I do hate to be vulgar," I said, lying. I loved being vulgar. "I guess we're a bit alike. I fix up old broken things too. I'm a tech at a big firm." "Which one?" she asked, still looking defensive. She was balancing the plates and wanted to drop them off in the kitchen, but it was probably more important to her to try to finagle a better tip from me, so she bore the weight. "Well, you wouldn't know it. It's an industry kind of thing. It's called Merit International," I said. "Really, only the clients know about it." "Yeah, I haven't heard of that, but it sounds nice," she said. I could see her arm beginning to tremble a little. She was so old. What was she doing here? Where was the pretty young waitress I deserved? Where was the drinkable coffee I had paid for? I'd find a new diner tomorrow morning, I told myself. "It is nice." I waited for a beat, for her to try to escape to the kitchen. The moment I perceived her foot begin to move, I began speaking again, loudly, but as pleasantly as I could. She stopped. I saw the plates slide a little, her muscles tensed. "So, you always worked here? It seems like someone with a knack for repairing things could do better than this place. You'd be surprised how many people these days can't even fix a coffee maker." Warm, non-threatening. Open her up a little, drop her guard, I thought, turning her over in my mind like a piece of network equipment. "Well, I used to be a mechanic, actually. The better part of a decade, but now the cars..." Her eyes took on a distant look, and I could tell she was drifting a bit in her memory. "They're hard to service unless you take them to the dealership now. A lot of smaller shops went down this past year, on account of that and the shutdowns and all." She betrayed an opinion in the way she said shutdowns, and I noticed for the first time that she wasn't wearing her face mask quite correctly, her nose barely peeking over the top. Probably mad about the plague, the economy, being forced to wear this little fucker to work here, I thought. I couldn't care less one way or the other what people did back then, but you could certainly tell what side someone played on. They literally wore it on their face, either with pride in their intelligence and consideration of others, or shame if their employer forced them to do it. Some of the most rebellious wore nothing at all. "Yeah," I said. "Less money to go around, less people driving too. Or, you know what I think?" She said nothing, waited for me to continue. "I think that the shops that closed probably deserved it. A bunch of amateur hacks out there just meddling with professionally engineered hardware. What did they expect? These little shops, just refuges for criminals and underachievers, really. Isn't that what you are? Why you're here every morning bringing me this disgusting swill and abusing me with your disgusting face? Well, the half I can see, anyway." She flinched hard at that, her eyes locked dead with mine. Was it my fault she had to lower herself to a service job when her little Mavericks club closed down? I continued, never breaking eye contact. "I guess in the end, even you independent types just bent over and took it, huh? Just to work here? That must be humiliating. Well, maybe you should have gone to college. If you'd done that, if you tried to better yourself, maybe you'd be working at the firm with me instead of unclogging your manager's broken coffee machine and unclogging his diseased little pecker for him after hours." She was frozen. I leaned towards her from the seat. "In this world, people get what they deserve, sweetheart." I felt a kind of cold wind then, a draft. I was enjoying my epic rant too much to notice, though. She may have felt it too, because she dropped all the dishes. I collected my things and left, smirking like the star of my own little movie. The office was a fucking nightmare. People were just running around in the lobby, shouting into their phones. One young woman I didn't recognize was crying and trying to scroll her phone, the tears confusing her touchscreen as they splashed on it and rolled down the side of her novelty phone case, which was festooned with pink fur and cat ears. I walked straight to the elevator, not making eye contact with anyone. What a bunch of performative, unprofessional bullshit, I thought. A short ride, a snippet of soulless music. The doors opened and I strolled into the tech division with the same proud gait I carried myself with everywhere I went, passing the shitty little cubicles to get to my office, my little slice of heaven. As soon as I entered, I saw my assistant's trembling little rat-like face, and I assumed I'd be cleaning up something. Whatever it was, I'd handle it. It couldn't be worse than several weeks previous, when the client the firm called the mayor had started leaking on national television. The firm had ordered the mayor, per the agreement he had signed, to cease all public appearances until he received maintenance, but he had blown them off. In such a case, techs and cleanup crews sometimes intervened immediately. Couldn't have the client winding up in a hospital somewhere, with regular doctors eyeballing all the fancy hardware we installed in them. I remembered the job, barreling across town to the airport, rushing from the airport to the building where I intercepted him, rushing up behind him in his coterie of sycophants. I remember I had called him Mr. Mayor to make him turn around, his staff all turning as he did, like a pack of little dogs. He loved it, being called Mr. Mayor. I was so sure he was about to tell me I didn't have to call him that because he wasn't the mayor anymore, when I popped a gas cartridge and he collapsed into my arms. That shit was so much easier to use after the plague had hit, since you could wear the tiny company issue gas mask under a regular face mask, and they never saw you coming. The mayor's entourage hit the ground like sacks of cement, but who cared? They didn't have contracts or fragile hardware inside them. I dragged him to a storage closet, where I propped him up in a corner and plunged my hand through the soft synthetic skin covering his installation cavity like he was a giant ventriloquist's dummy, which I suppose he might have been. Some of them had brain implants, too. The firm put them in during regular maintenance sometimes to control certain markets, but I wouldn't have known. It wasn't my department. Systems ran independently of each other anyway. Some of the clients probably would have been upset about that if they ever found out the firm meddled in their skulls, but it was right there in the EULA. Those lazy fuckers should have taken time to read it. People just wanted everything handed to them these days, I thought, while rooting around in the mayor's stinking guts like a field surgeon on a battlefield. I knew my way around. After all, his contract was one of mine, but he had never met me. I only installed his hardware while he was unconscious and performed regular maintenance. Well, I usually did. But the mayor's previous service appointment I had delegated to my assistant to leave me more time to work on some custom hardware I was modifying for use in a very big, very important contract I wanted to take over. The biggest contract at our firm was a guy called the Deal Maker, and people politely pretended to not know who he was because they didn't want any trouble, but I thought it was pretty obvious. By then, by January of 2021, people had to know. How was he getting away with all the bullshit he did? How was he living like he did? And for 4 years even, without a little help from us. It was the kind of contract that led straight to a promotion upstairs. And I liked my assistant, and I wanted him to have the chance to prove himself. And I was being punished for that, I thought. For trying to manufacture opportunity for someone else instead of letting them earn what they got on their own. The American way. Nature's way. The connections to the reservoir were completely fucked. The expensive maintenance fluid was running into the cavity. From there, it would seep out the pores of the skin, usually from the head or the face. It didn't mix exactly with any other fluids, and it tended to rise upwards. I worked as quickly as I could and fixed it just as clean as I would have in one of our own facilities, thanks to my portable instruments, small enough to smuggle in my jacket, and my skill, of course. I was the fucking best, I thought, as I patched up the mayor and left him in the hallway, calling the cleanup boys as I made my escape to make sure explanations were in place and everyone woke up somewhere comfortable. Compensating them to keep them quiet if necessary. We would bill the mayor for that. When I got back to the field office we had established in the big city for the cleanup operation, my assistant was begging me to forgive him. I strode up to him like a god on earth and slapped his soft little face hard enough to knock him down, leaving a viscous brown stain of rotten blood mingled with the firm's maintenance fluid, marking him like the failure that he was. He should have thanked me, I thought, for even touching him with the hand that bestowed immortality. He never should have washed his ugly fucking face again. "That's the last time I ask anything of you," I said, as coolly as possible, imagining my boss, how he would do it. "You can stay my assistant on paper until you get a promotion or a transfer, but that's all the help you'll ever get from me." His jaw hung open in amazement or terror, and weeks later, I saw the exact same vacant fear, the inability to comprehend the cost of his failure on his face as soon as I walked into our office. Well, the boss would probably be around soon enough, and he'd damn well comprehend it then, I thought. "Sir," he began, barely able to speak. "Casino, he died." "Really dead?" I asked, pulling out my phone. Certainly explained the chaos downstairs. It had just happened. Maybe the crying girl, maybe it was her account. Maybe she just worked in accounting, I thought. After all, this was before I knew where accounting really was, how it worked. "No recovery operation? No squad?" I scrolled my phone. Even now, people were penning and publishing breathless eulogies for the old piece of shit. My mind raced. "Should have paid the maintenance fee." A voice from behind me, like a wind in a desert, like a handful of dust blown off the palm and into the void. The boss, Zed Bakinski, had sort of appeared in our office. He was the lead tech. We knew that wasn't his real name. He had chosen it to honor a favorite painter of his. They usually went with artists. The old boss had been known as Mr. Geiger until he was promoted to the board. He was as rich as anyone, though, any of the clients. Why did he neglect his account? Could it have been a mistake? I asked. I was reasonably sure that Casino had probably made the same mistake as me, trusting some incompetent underling who probably assumed that the invoice from Merit could wait a few days or a week. I could smell the kid's urine. Sometimes people did that when Bakinski dropped in on them. Whatever he did to move around threw people's control of their bodies off. It was still kind of disturbing to me, and it was as cold as a freezer in my office within seconds, but I always kept it professional around Zed. Never pissed or vomited involuntarily when he did his little trick. Never so much as batted an eye. I had even stopped having nosebleeds when he talked to me after a few weeks. It was one of the reasons he liked me, I thought. I could stand with him as an equal, for I felt we were equals, and I believed he did too, at least as much as he could feel anything. "I don't know, Philip," he said. The mirrored black shades, the perfect suit, the impossibly smooth shaved head. He barely moved when he spoke. "I only know he didn't pay, and we are not sending a team." God, he was so fucking professional. I would have loved him if I could love. But that's not why I'm here, boys. I'm here because the mayor is underperforming, and we're having trouble getting a team in to work on him. Too many eyeballs. You cut it close on your last run, Philip. It was sloppy. And the shit he's in now, the board feels he violated the non-disclosure agreement. He is putting the firm at risk, and his contract is being closed. Such a reduction in workload will of course necessitate a reduction in staff. I had been staring straight at Bakinski, and then I wasn't. I was looking at the wall. I turned to look for my moron assistant to see if he had filled up his little diaper like the baby he was when Bakinski did his disappearing act, but instead, I saw Bakinski was standing right in front of him. In a fluid, silent motion, my boss produced a sort of a tooth from the inside of his suit jacket. It was around 11 or 12 inches in length, conical with a slight curve. complex serrations twisting around it like fine scrimshaw and ending in an impossibly fine point. It rotated in his hand once, and I saw him jam it into my assistant's guts, upward and under his ribcage. Bakinski's arm moved upwards, straight for the ceiling, as if the tooth met no resistance at all, and I heard the young man's ribcage give way like soft chicken bones. Saw his chest and his throat burst open and coat his shirt and the floor with a great volume of blood and entrails, and what might have been a lung. He collapsed like a pile of garbage before he could open his mouth to scream. Bakinski was standing by the door again somehow, and I turned my head back to listen as he talked. I offered no reaction whatsoever. His suit was clean, not a drop on it, and his glasses were completely straight. The black lenses reflected my face, which I held perfectly still, as if nothing had happened, as if the kid had never even existed. "You won't let this happen again," he said to me. I nodded. Fucking kid, I thought. At least old Zed had done it quick and without telling me beforehand, spared me sweating over it. Maybe he had a heart after all, but I doubted it. He was most likely made of even more hardware at this point than even the most wealthy of our clients. "Take an early lunch," he said, and I complied as fast as I could. I had meant to skip the diner after the incident that morning, but the killing had shaken me, and I drove there sort of automatically. Had he forgiven me? Had the firm decided I was worth keeping? Yes, I told myself. I was the best tech they had. I had taken a little basic knowledge of networking, some courses I took in college on computers, and used it to understand the firm's rather unique hardware better than any other tech in our department. It wasn't just that I was smarter than the rest, which I knew that I was, or more talented. I was professional, like Zed, and I believed that my dedication and loyalty, my devotion to my work would protect me. I still believed in the American dream. Not that everyone got a fair shot, of course. I knew that was a fairy tale, but I believed that you made your own luck with hard work, and no one worked harder than me. The waitress, the same old bent-backed hag from that morning, had taken my order silently. She seemed to have decided to put the incident behind us, but it was hard to tell with the mask. I noticed she had pulled it up over her nose completely. What a slave, I thought. What a coward. There were worse things out there than the plague. Myself, for example. My boss. I kept thinking of old Zed. The day he hired me. I was sitting in a detestably hip little coffee shop on the other side of town. I had been unable to get a wireless connection and had complained to the staff, who just shrugged and went back to milling around the place like cattle. I needed to finish some work for my very boring, very regular job I had at the time, and I became so impatient I finally walked up to the counter and asked to see their router. After rebooting it and logging it into its simple little brain on my laptop, I finally got a connection and submitted my work, and I remember telling the staff how easy it had been to do. They all just shrugged at me again, and one of them told me if anything went wrong with the router, they would tell their boss to bill my credit card number. On the drive home, I got a call. Zed said he'd been very happy with my company's work servicing their network. He didn't specify when or what company, and he was wondering if I wanted a better job. I said I felt I deserved one because I was so much more qualified than my coworkers. And he wheezed out a bizarre laugh and hired me immediately. My phone, sitting on the table in the diner, lit up, and it showed his name on the screen like I had summoned him. I answered. "Sir," I began. He just began speaking as if I didn't even exist. "Take the rest of the day off." Click of a disconnection. I stared at the phone, probably looking like a beaten animal. I realized the waitress was looking at me. "Work not going well?" she asked, her eyes upturned just enough to betray the smile below the mask. I could have killed her. I could have killed that fucking stupid peasant, that fucking waste on the spot. I was armed, not like old Zed, of course, but with a pistol. I could have lied and said it was because she saw an email on my laptop or tried to listen in on my conversation, not that it was much of one, and the cleanup boys might have kept it quiet for me. The restaurant was pretty empty as always, and I had a few gas cartridges. I didn't have the small gas mask on, but it was in my pocket, ready for just such an occasion. But as much as I wanted to end her like the bug she was, I was much more angry at myself. I had not missed a single day of work since I started working for Merit International, and now the fuck up with the mayor was going to cost half a day's pay. I thought of my bids on eBay, on the original copies of books, the paintings, the old comics, first printings. I might lose on one or two auctions, which I made a point never to do. I stood up and left without so much as a word or a glance in her direction. Fucking lazy peasant will get what's coming to her, I thought. I'd be doing her a favor if I stopped her clock now. I walked past what must have been her car in the parking lot. An old wreck she probably worked on herself, sitting there like a wart in a row of brand new shining SUVs and sedans. I smirked at the right-wing bumper stickers. In the end, you put the mask on just to serve coffee, just to survive. You had all the time in the world to better yourself, but some people were just born to be slaves, I thought. I got into my own car and drove home, thinking of all the idiots just like her, all the pathetic losers who called the mayor Mr. Mayor, even as he fleeced them broke and barren, even as his guts pumped the firm's own eldritch juices just to keep him talking loudly and confidently, just to keep his stinking old dick hard when he met with an escort. The amazing little pump that I had put in, the one that in a month would be failing whether he paid us or not. They'd gladly take his last few payments if he sent them, even if they were cutting him off. He should have read the EULA. Breach of contract, of trust, I thought. Violation of the agreement. I was getting nervous. Maybe some time off would help after all. I was wrong, of course. It didn't help at all. I had grown accustomed to a few hours each day after work of enjoying my collection, my relics, my toys. I should have been happy for the opportunity, but I couldn't stop thinking about work. I ended up pulling out my phone, browsing news reports. The mayor couldn't finish a public appearance without completely filling his expensive slacks with shit. He was running like a faucet, and judging by the looks on people's faces in the videos and photographs, they could definitely smell it. He had a couple months tops without maintenance, without a refill. The cleanup boys would show up in the ambulance when he finally dropped, or maybe the firm would pay off the coroner or the morgue employees, and contract closed. Contract closed. The phrase echoed in my mind. I set the phone on my antique coffee table next to the old issues of Amazing Spider-Man, the perfect condition first printings of Detective Comics. I decided to shower and get some sleep. Fresh start tomorrow, I thought. And I was kind of right. The water ran over my body, drowned out my thoughts, suffocating the struggling insecurity trying to rise within my stomach, my chest, but it only worked for a few minutes. I turned the handle to shut it off and pulled the curtain aside. A sudden frozen draft that obliterated the warmth in the bathroom, and I guess, looking back on my last day topside, I sort of knew Zed Bakinski would be standing there. Of course he would do me at the house. Terminating the assistant at work was a good message for the other employees. Word had gotten around that I had let him service the mayor, but terminating me in front of them would only make them think about the point of advancement and whether they would one day suffer the same fate. He was also doing the cleanup boys a real solid, effort-wise, or just saving labor hours by doing me in the tub. But he wasn't alone. A cluster of agony, like a swarm of bees, struck me in the stomach and stung, and as I felt my back touch the wall of the shower, felt my knees buckle, I realized a firearm had gone off, but the sound was dampened somehow. I knew Zed had all the tricks for things like that, making things quiet, go unnoticed, but why not just use the tooth? There you go, you fucking bougie piece of shit. said the waitress. I saw smoke curling from the barrel of a gaudy red, white, and blue shotgun. Could see her gnarled old finger resting on the trigger. If I had been able to stand, I suspect that she might have pulled it again, but there was no chance of that. She had hit the fancy brand new pump I had been so proud of having installed the previous month right in the battery, and the acid was already seeping into my shredded viscera. The rare, precious fluid was leaking too, running down my legs. I smelled my own excrement. I thought of the mayor, crumpled and reeking in the supply closet, his eyes wide and staring. I'm going to sell your fucking pussy boy comic books and paintings, and I'm going to get me a nice new car and a nice new house, and I'm going to do your job. Zed just hired me, so fuck you. She was trying to stay cool, trying to really let me have it, but I could hear a hint of fear in her voice. It reminded me of the first time I ever saw a pump. I tried to play it off all cool, like, I've had gaming laptops with a more complicated cooling system than this, I had said to Zed, pretending that I wasn't screaming inside, pretending I wasn't looking at the final, ultimate repudiation of my beliefs, of the proof that it wasn't the deserving that received the rewards at all, but just the wealthy. But my days of pretending, it seemed, were over. What a shame you had to neglect your duties, that you had to get yourself into this situation. Maybe someone more deserving, someone with more merit, could have juggled that project you had on the side along with your other contracts, but you let me down, Philip, Zed said, as he reached for my lanyard with my company ID with my name on it. Picked it up from the marble counter by the sink. Philip, Zed's memory was perfect. He could recall anything he had ever learned instantly. It dawned on me then that he had only ever known my first name. He stared at the lanyard. Pocham? Poucham? Is this French? He asked, looking at it. Pogchamp, I sputtered. Blood and acid ran out of my mouth, my esophagus burned, my chin melted away and exposed the bone underneath. Well, your employment and subsequently your existence is hereby canceled, Mr. Pogchamp. As far as your side project, I should probably have told you this sooner, but the deal maker's hardware, it's not mechanical. It's not something you would recognize or understand. It's handled by another department. Service is performed exclusively by them, and, well, they don't need your help, Philip. Maybe your replacement will stay in her lane. He nodded towards the woman, and my eyes widened. Her! This stupid cow! I sputtered, the loose flesh dangling from my chin, most of my lower lip comically flying off and landing on my fancy imported bathroom tiles from the force of my outburst. She could never. The contracts, they're too important. We control everything. All the richest, most important. We control the country. The president. Philip, you dipshit. Zed cut me off, sounding extremely disappointed, even more than before. The president is organic. He doesn't have any hardware. Matter of fact, he wouldn't take it. He turned us down. He said my suit was tacky. He kept asking about my bald head. He put his big paw right on it. He didn't want any doctors looking at him except his own. He said he had a guy. And for a moment, I thought maybe another firm had gotten to him first. Maybe we had some competition out there, but when I investigated this doctor, I knew I was wrong. Nope, the man was just an imbecile. He hated the food at the restaurant we took him to and spent the rest of the meeting trying to fuck the waitress. Next to Zed, My replacement released a sigh of disgust and exhaustion in solidarity with the poor waitress from the bad food restaurant. Zed went on. You think that's who the deal maker is? You kids are so fucking out to lunch. You and your collectibles, your video games, your superheroes, your meritocracy, your American dream. No, Philip, the deal maker is the real man behind the curtain, and he's offered to help us expand our market in the new global capital, the great kingdom rising on the horizon. He is known as a great friend to China. I sputtered again, blood clotting and ceasing to flow, the acid burning but no longer flowing from the burst battery. I tried to speak, to refute him, or to perhaps beg. The pain was unbearable, but I knew that if he were to relent, the other techs could still save me. It wouldn't be the same after, but I'd be alive. Here you go, Philip, he said, throwing my lanyard onto my burst entrails. Pay the boatman with this. Now, if you would, my dear, show Philip what you showed me at your interview. The waitress peeled off the surgical mask. The lower half of her face was a mess of scar tissue, no lips at all, just teeth like a skull and burns surrounding. I was a good mechanic, you fucking fancy boy. I'm going to be better than you ever were at ripping the bits and pieces out of these ghouls and putting them back together. I brought back old heaps that would have sent you crying right back to your stupid fucking routers and your piss baby video games. I got burned working on an old junker. Cap just popped off with my face right over it, and after I got out of the hospital, they said I could stay on if I wanted, but I saw how they looked at me, how everybody did. So I stayed home and spent my savings until the plague, I sputtered. Yep, and by then the shop was closed, so I took the job as a waitress. But I don't work there anymore now, and I'm about to pull your fucking plug and scrap you for parts, you fucking nobody. And nobody is going to know or care because you got nobody. And what did you say? People get what they deserve? Well, you had that right, you bitch-made little prince. She raised the barrel. I closed my eyes. No, I heard Zed say. I opened my eyes. Was he going to intervene? This was all to set me right, set me back on the path. He was going to let me live and learn from my mistakes. He touched the barrel of the shotgun. Use the other end, he said. You sure? She looked a little worried or possibly disgusted. I was laid up a long time. I haven't swung a hammer in years. Could take a while. That's fine, Zed told her. Because it really doesn't matter if you're strong or even good at it. What matters is that I gave you the opportunity. That I happened to overhear your conversation with Philip here this morning. The cold draft. She hadn't dropped the plates because I had gotten to her. It was her reaction to him. And it was barely a reaction at all for the first time. She was stronger than me, than anyone at the firm. I'd been shopping around for his replacement since his little mistake, and once I did your background check, I knew you wanted what I was offering, and you would do anything to get it. To have revenge for your, well... She's kind of like you, isn't she, Philip? Just like you said this morning. Remember the day I hired you? You thought you aced the interview? No, Philip. I'd been taking my repast in the coffee shop where you threw your little fit. The way you verbally abused them, the workers. The way you talked down to them for not knowing how to fix a stupid router, your entitlement. You thought they wouldn't help you because they couldn't. In fact, they just didn't care about you. No one did. No one does. But I knew I could work with you, mold you. We hired a lot of people who were like you in those days, but now I think the scales have tilted back the other way. I think now the rage, the shame, the desire. I think the ball is in their court now, Philip. I'd deliver a bonus for recruiting this fine specimen to your nearest and dearest after your impending demise, but you have none, so I will instead pay it out to your replacement as a signing bonus. Begin, he said to her, and take your time. We have all night. I don't remember much after that, but at some point I must have crossed over. And I really don't miss being topside. As soon as I got here, I transferred to accounting. The whole accounting division is here, and I've been happy. I miss the material pleasures, the comforts of the flesh, but it is satisfying to do the books. We aren't paid in any sense, of course. We aren't technically employees, but I am one with the accounting department. We have good synergy. In the end, I didn't rise as high as I wanted, but I can't say I'm upset about how it turned out. The mayor and casino work here too, and a lot of other folks I remember from Topside. People that remember what a hard worker I was. And even if I did miss it, the dealmaker said during a special address he gave just for us, for our whole department, that we're going back very soon, all together. So I've got that to look forward to. And I know the truth now, that the meritocracy had been a lie, a construct. The great men, well, they were just clockwork inside. They took an opportunity my firm offered them, just chance, really. Could have been anyone, a smart kid like me or an old junkyard rat like the waitress. And I know that when we all go topside, I'm not going to miss my next opportunity. I'm not going to miss my next chance to be great when it comes. Because I'm the best at accounting now. And when I get back, I'm going to hold them all accountable.